Hi, everyone. You're all very welcome to this morning's session on digital marketing with impact. We're delighted that Catherine Griffin is here to take us through the next hour or thereabouts. Just a couple of things. First of all, we'd love to acknowledge our principal funder, the Arts Council, and also to acknowledge that cultural and creative industry, CCI SkillNet, have also supported this training. A few little housekeeping things. We are recording the session, and you're very welcome to pop questions into the chat, but if possible, we'll come to the questions at the end of the session. So Catherine's going to present for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a look at the questions afterwards. And it's great to see you all this morning. And now I'm delighted to hand over to Catherine.
Great, thanks, Irma. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. But yeah, first of all, it's amazing to see the number of people signed up. I think, the level of interest in this session probably tells us something about digital marketing, which is it can feel quite hard and confusing. But with audiences spending growing amounts of time online, it feels increasingly vital. So today we're going to talk about three things that are going to help you on this journey. Firstly, data. The reason we're going to start with data is we all have a lot of feelings and preconceptions around digital channels, especially social media. We're going to start with the data to look at where digital fits within the broader marketing landscape and to get a sense check in some of the different channels. Second, we're going to look at what is changing around digital marketing, which is spoiler quite a lot, and what we can take from that. And then lastly, we're going to look at some essential approaches to making your digital marketing more impactful. So I'm Catherine. I have been working in digital marketing one way or another since 2004, which is a very long time. I work with arts and nonprofit organisations to make their strategy and communications more impactful. Before we jump into this presentation in detail, I really want to emphasise that while we're only talking about digital this morning, it doesn't take away from the importance of your broader marketing approach. Performing Arts Forum just ran a fantastic marketing programme, Druidstone, which was led by Katie Rains and Heather Maitland. And that really refocused on all of the fundamentals of your marketing approach: audience identification, messaging, the marketing funnel. And digital sits inside this world. I'm in the middle of Harry Potter land with my eldest at the moment, and we were just reading the other night how a wand is only as powerful as the wizard behind it. And digital marketing really fits within that. It can be incredibly powerful, but to make it work, you really need that robust marketing strategy behind it. So we're going to look at the numbers. And why? Because we fall into habits and we have our own perceptions about which channels are more or less dominant. And these things change every single year. I'm going to start with pulling some numbers from a source called datareportal.com. This is publicly available. It's amazing information on everything digital that's happening. And it's tailored for every country globally, actually, and is refreshed every 6 months. So it's well worth a look. In this kind of first slide that we have, one of the key stats here is that 80% of our population have social media identities. And the pace of growth in this is actually faster than population growth, which tells you something. This also gives us some really interesting information about weekly time spent. So how long are people spending across different channels? And as you see, this isn't just showing digital channels, but all media channels. When I sit and work with a client on their marketing approach, this is one of the first things we look at is who are the audience you're trying to reach and what channels they are. And the dominance of the channels is a really key consideration to where you're spending your time and your money. And again, the next area is frequency. So again, social media is the most frequent, but also kind of notice where kind of online press is coming in, where podcasts are coming in. So this is really, really helpful data to be shaping where you're spending your time and why. So to jump into social media specifically, let's look at why people are on it. And why am I showing you this? Because when we make content, we don't just think about who our audience are and what matters to them, but it also helps to know why they're on this platform. And the entertainment factor comes out very strongly in this list of reasons for being on social media. Then you probably also want to think about which platforms within social media. So what surprises you here? Like, are there any that you're not on that you're looking at this? What always catches me is how dominant Facebook is staying. And this always surprises me because it's one of the most frequent things that people tell me is Facebook's dead, nobody's on Facebook, I'm not on Facebook. And the numbers keep saying differently. So it's a really, really key thing to keep in mind that people are very much still using Facebook. It is declining slightly, but it's still a very dominant space. What I will say about it is it's highly saturated, so it's kind of harder to kind of cut through in this piece. But who else is here? So we're seeing TikTok catching up really, really quickly. And that is a platform where it's traditionally been seen as the young person's platform, but that original audience, they've grown up. They're all in their 20s and 30s now. So it's very, very much a relevant platform for us. The two other ones I want to highlight are LinkedIn, which I think is one of the most underused platforms for the arts in Ireland, one I'd love to see more used. And the other one that's really up and coming is Reddit. And you're going to see some other interesting stats on this and why as we go. And then you can also see kind of how are people spending time. So it's not just where people are, but what's really bringing them in. And as you can see, I mean, YouTube is the absolute king of getting people to stay on their platforms. And but Instagram is still very, very strong there in terms of kind of how long people are actually spending. So this is a really good stat just to give you a view of how are these platforms changing. So just to give you, this is percentage change in that ad reach, which gives you a rough idea of their audience kind of numbers year on year. So what's going up and what's going down. So as you can see, Facebook, as I mentioned, is slightly declining. We have X/Twitter going down quite a bit. I would say it's probably going down more than this. Their numbers are a bit unreliable. We have, the ones that are kind of steadily gaining, YouTube, Instagram. TikTok is really continuing to grow in Ireland, and that's doing very, very well. But like the standout one is Reddit, and that's gone up 170% year on year. So I'm going to explain why that's becoming so dominant when we talk about trends, but very, very much one to be watching. Now, I'm now going to go down a level of data to data that's more specific to the arts. So this is from the Arts Council's annual survey. So this is where we know that arts audiences are engaging. How this slide really reinforces the importance of social media. Some of the things I would just question on this is TV. This may be including a lot of online streaming. I'd be surprised, but there isn't a huge amount of arts content, unfortunately, on TV, which is probably a reason for getting less information from it. Email list is surprisingly low on this, but we get a different picture when we go deeper into the data. And this is just anyone who's been engaging with the arts. So it's not taking into account people who are regular engagers. So we get a different picture when we go down a level. And again, this just shows the growing importance of online becoming more and more dominant. It's why we're here today and why it's just so essential that we're using these platforms well, because the next slide shows us that while the use is going up, the satisfaction is going down. Now, I would love the Arts Council to do more, or anyone to be able to do more detail on why this is. But if I had to guess on why satisfaction with arts information is going down online, it's because content is not cutting through anymore because of algorithmic changes, which we're going to talk about. I think it's because audiences are feeling overwhelmed from getting information from so many different sources and really just increasingly want to see this packaged, a feeling that they have to go to too many different places to find things. And then it's often the way the content is presented. I think we often kind of visualize social media as kind of like an online bulletin board. And the big thing I'm going to talk about today is why we need to change our thinking around that. So our last data set is the most specific for regular arts attenders, and this is the Indigo Share survey. So here you see that email mailing lists are much, much higher on the list, and which makes sense because that's where a lot of our regular attenders are getting their information. But then when we think about who our audiences are, we see that for first-time attenders, social media is a lot more important. Whereas for people who are returners, email is a lot more important. So when we're thinking about our strategy, when we're thinking about what information we're putting out in different channels, this is really, really key information for us to be able to use. So summary to the first part around data. I really urge you to just refresh your digital marketing approach at least every year. Go back to the data. What's changing? What's different? think about how you're spending your time and your budget, and is that matching up with where your audiences are? And consider kind of where your audiences have different needs and different channels. Not all channels are equal. Some are more important for loyalty, some are more important for new audiences. The data tells us really clearly that audiences online are growing and spending more time in these channels, but are less happy with what we as arts marketers are producing. So that's what we're going to look at next and figure out a little bit about why that might be happening. So I'm going to go into some of the top trends. So these are some of the top trends that people kind of across digital marketing are looking at the moment. So the first one is algorithms across social media. They have changed a lot. I have whole decks of training that I have absolutely thrown out and can't use anymore because of this guy. The two really big pieces to emphasize here. Your followers on social media have become almost meaningless in how your content is targeted. So the way content used to get targeted on social media, they were more likely to show it to somebody who was following your channel. They were more likely to show it to people who were friends with people who'd engaged. There were all these kind of social signals, and these have actually really all gone. And what they're doing is every content kind of fights for itself and is being shown to people who are most likely to engage with that type of content. So if people are engaging with other types of theatre content, they're going to see more types of theatre content. And this is changing all the time. So you'll probably see, like, if you go on a social media channel and you start looking at home interiors, you're suddenly going to get like loads of home interior stuff. And this is how the algorithms are changing. They're adapting all the time. Essentially what Meta have done is they've taken the TikTok model and they've placed it into Instagram specifically, not quite so much with Facebook. The other big change that's happening here is increasing saturation. So it's just harder and harder there's just so much more content on these platforms. And then the last thing that I think is super interesting for people to be aware of is hashtags. So this has been a really big change over the last while, is their platforms are actually introducing hashtag limits because they're just not important anymore. So it used to be that you're trying to help your content get in front of the right people, and your hashtags were a signal to make sure that they got there. And these have just become less and less important. The algorithm doesn't need them anymore. So that's kind of a big change around the algorithm. The next side, and this is, you're probably seeing this a huge amount, is the world of AI. So with AI coming onto digital platforms, we're particularly, our kind of whole perception of content is changing. And as humans, we're seeking out other human content. This is a really big reason for Reddit becoming so popular. And this is because the younger generations are becoming very attuned to what's potentially kind of not real on social media platforms. And they're kind of really seeking out that human generated content, which I think is good news for the human race. And it's one of the reasons for Reddit really up and coming, because there's slightly more control over who you're talking to and what you're doing. I mean, there's some really interesting examples as well, kind of, you know, you really see this coming across within kind of arts content as well. So there's a lovely, this amazing group in the UK called Blast Theory, who are an interactive art collective, and they've actually done a lot of data gathering about this. And what they're seeing is really audiences want to be brought along the journey in a really deeply authentic way. They want to know what's working, what's not working, what decisions do you have to make. And they did a fantastic project called Cat Royale, which I'd urge you to seek out on YouTube, especially if you want to lose an hour. It's all about cats working in a lab with an AI-generated, AI-controlled robot arm. It's amazing. But their project was a really good example of this, because as they documented everything in the project along the way, meeting the robot arm for the first time, introducing the cats. And even just recently, Paddington the Musical in the UK went viral with a really simple video of just them making lots of oranges for Paddington, because Paddington loves oranges. And they were making lots of oranges for the set from cricket balls, because you can't use real oranges. And the audiences just went absolutely mental for this. They absolutely love it. So that real content, reliably human content, is what's cutting through. Kind of building on that is this idea of social selling. So social selling was one of the big buzzwords in 2025. Brandwatch called it kind of as their top marketing strategy of last year. And what it really involves is a brand being engaging or useful over pushing a product. And this is something I think is really important for arts organizations, because again, we often use our digital channels as that way just to promote what's happening, tell people what's happening. And increasingly that's just not working. And this is one of the reasons why. We know kind of in society there's a trust deficit at the moment. And this is really driving people coming back to that more. Again, it's kind of building on the AI and human trends. And it's that means our patrons want to feel connected to us and invested in us. And that when they are feeling more connected to us, they are more loyal and they spend more. So what does this mean for arts organizations? So this is why we see more and more groups really leaning in on their leaders' social profiles. So you often see this with kind of companies across the board, but I'm definitely seeing it more and more with arts organizations in Ireland, is the chief executives, the artistic directors are playing a much more prominent role on social media. And they are as important as your kind of corporate channel in a different way, because that sense of connection, there's that sense of authenticity. But I also wouldn't underestimate everyone in the organization and how you feature people where they're comfortable in different videos, because that kind of individual piece really helps your audiences feel connected to you and builds trust. Okay, so the next trend, and this is probably something that's going to be a lot less popular, growth in advertising. So I said before that I think we see social media as this free bulletin board, and it really isn't. And it kind of hasn't been for a long time. We've been kind of trusting and hoping that our content gets through to our followers. That's happening less and less because of the algorithms, but also because there's just more and more content on there. So we really need to be focusing more on using certainly meta advertising and search advertising to reach our audiences reliably. And there's huge advantages to this because we can do a lot of fun things with advertising. And then the other side of it is it doesn't need to be a lot of money. It can be a very small amount of money that can really deliver much higher reach and much higher engagement. One to watch as well, and I think this could be part of a growing trend, is Meta is testifying this idea of meta verified, where again, this is in testing. We don't know if this is going to come through, but the idea that you pay to have more functionality on their site. So if you want to reach bigger audiences, they're potentially signing up to subscription platforms. So it's definitely one to be keeping an eye on in terms of trends, is how we may be actually being drawn into actually pay subscription models for more of these channels. And then the last one, and sorry, this is another slightly doom and gloom one, but one to be really, really keenly aware of, is AI summaries in search are very much kind of changing how search is working. And I loved this description in the HubSpot newsletter a few weeks ago, which described AI summaries as like your weird uncle, and nobody knows exactly how they choose the sources they cite. And it's a bit of a mystery at the moment. It's a bit of a black box. We're not quite sure where this is coming from. But what we found is, so Reuters, the Institute for the Study of Journalism, they found that media executives around the world are actually worried that the search engine referrals are going to fall by 42% over the next 3 years. So this is an area in which kind of news and press are very, very focused on. The potential for us is we may again end up having to spend more on search advertising. Now, the good news for us is charities are eligible for a certain amount of free search advertising through Google, which is good. There are also emerging SEO strategies that are helping people kind of get their content in these AI summaries. But look, the big trend, which is certainly kind of continuing, is that while impressions are staying fairly steady, the click-throughs to websites are dropping. And that's something that I'd urge you all to be kind of keeping an eye on yourselves. And I think it's a really interesting trend to just be keeping an eye on for the arts industry in Ireland, so that we all get a better sense of what's actually happening here, because it is very much a developing space. Okay, so to summarize kind of the key trends, better content is key. Again, coming back to the data, while this feels hard, it's really essential that we work to improve our content, because our audiences are here they're looking to digital channels to get their information. And in order for us to connect with them, we have to improve our content. I'd really like to stop thinking of social as kind of a free bulletin board. We can reliably reach very specific audiences on these channels, and that paid promotion is very much worth it. And I think then lastly, just keep an eye on search and have a look at what's happening there. Be tracking what's coming through to your website and what's going on there. Okay, to the bit you kind of all want to know, okay, well, what do I do? And how do we actually make our online marketing a little bit more effective? So the foundations are kind of these kind of 4 pillars. The first area is your plan. And I kind of think of your plan as your extra team member. You know, you can have the best content, but if you don't have clear goals and measurement and you don't know why you're doing this and you're not being consistent, it's not going to drive results for your organization. And then again, you can have a great plan, but if you don't have great content, then it's not going to cut through to the audiences that you're looking at. With promotion, it's not always possible for all organic content to meet every audience. So having that promotion there to support what you're doing is really, really key. And then tracking. This is probably another area that I think is really underused within the arts in Ireland, is using all of the tracking that's available to us through digital marketing. I would love to see more on that. So what does a digital plan look like? So, I mean, look, this is a lot of what I do in consultative work with organizations, is pulling all this together. Again, this is building on your organizational strategy. It's building on your marketing strategy. This ideally should not be a standalone thing that's completely different to everything else you're doing. Everything should be connected. So you're starting with your organization's purpose, vision, and goals. And then within that, you're thinking about what are some of the key messages? How do I represent my organization through a couple of really, really strong messages that are going to connect and help people understand my purpose and vision and goals? Within that, I recommend content pillars, and this really helps give a bit of consistency to your plan. And we'll talk a bit more about this. For a lot of performing arts organizations, these pillars tend to be around the ideas of venue, program, and audience. This will change for different types of arts organizations. That would be reasonably typical for art centers, for theaters. And then under that, you think, well, what are my channels? And, you know, you're thinking about email, the social media, website, SEO, and then underneath, this is all being supported by promotion, by digital advertising, to make sure what we're doing is reaching the people we want to. Interesting stat there again from HubSpot from the 2025 marketing report. Following on from my post less, post better, 64% of marketers are posting less than daily. So where a couple of years ago I would have been telling you that frequent posting was really important, I'm now saying post less, post better. So some just helpful pieces. And hopefully this also, I'm going to show you an example of another organization's plan, and this will maybe make it feel a little bit less overwhelming. But the reason I kind of start with a plan is that kind of that difference between being busy and impactful. I put this in because I know you're all really, really busy. You have so many different things coming at you from different directions. And taking the time to sit down, whether it's at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the season, to really sit down and plan out how you're going to do this, where are your audiences, where are your channels, what kind of tone of voice, what type of content you're going to produce, and then refreshing that on a monthly and a weekly basis is just going to make such a difference. It also really helps you push back on annoying requests from across the organization to share things or include things in the newsletter if it doesn't fit within your plan. So what's in a strong media plan, a strong plan? So again, this comes back to the overall marketing plan. Your digital supports your overall marketing approach. Ideally, the first 2 pieces you already have in place. So your clearly defined audiences and your messages. And then within that, you've got your content pillars. They keep you focused from always kind of posting by this type content. And then your channel is really figuring out what works in different channels. When do you post things? When do you choose to do something over email versus social? And then it's all kind of underpinned by the goals and key performance indicators. That's what KPI stands for. The strong plan will drive strong content. So what I have up here is the marketing funnel. So anyone who's just finished Druid is kind of Druidstone is really well aware of this. But it's the idea that there are different stages for audiences when we're trying to talk to them. There's starting with awareness, telling them something's happening, moving on to actually piquing their interest, getting them to consider, and then purchase and loyalty. So are you posting to get that sale, to sell that ticket, or to reach an audience? So a lot of posting tends to be, this is happening, buy these tickets. But what's happening with the algorithms focusing more on content that engages and entertains, these posts are just not going to reach your audience. So if you're sitting there thinking social just isn't really working anymore, this is why. It's because social has changed and continues to be really impactful that we have to approach. So an interesting thing in this side is I mentioned that a lot of your content is now going to non-followers. So if this is the case, how do you make sure that every post you post is really clear about who you are? And like if you're posting about shows, that they know kind of what the show is and where it's on. So what's happening is that that algorithm is actually kind of pushing more of our social content up the funnel, up towards kind of more awareness and interest. And to get to that purchase side, we're really leaning more heavily on our email lists and on paid promotion when we need to. So this next slide is a lovely case study that I absolutely love about kind of how do you actually build out some of that content. So I'm telling you to be more engaging, tell stories, don't just sell tickets, really try and get to that why. Well, this is a lovely example, and it's from a good while ago, actually. I think it's from 2017, about how you actually do that. One of the reasons I love this is because working in the arts, we all really care about the artistic integrity of what we promote. And I like this example because it shows how you can make the difficult in inverted commas, more accessible by starting with understanding your audience. So this is about kind of a classical symphony that's being promoted in the States. So it was something that was maybe kind of a bit hard to love. And what they did was they looked at what makes this special and its idea of this one cymbal crash. And instead of just telling somebody, this is why this is important, they told stories about it. So they did interviews with the percussionists. They did blogs, and you can actually link through in slides to see the blog post. They showed kind of side-by-side images of like the amount of notes for the violin and one note for the percussion. And it was because it sparked curiosity and excitement. And so people came to the concert just to see that cymbal crash. And it really comes to that idea that your content, building that story around these performances, around these pieces, is what can drive those ticket sales. And it just underlines, I think, the value of these. But I'm also keenly aware that, we're all just working with limited resources. So I wanted to show you an example of a very, very simple image-based Instagram post that the Barbican did recently, which I thought showed a really, really nice example of a well-executed just kind of carousel of images with text on Instagram, all completely accessible to us, but written with really great copy. So it starts with this hook, the 3-hour phone call. So we're not giving people the title, we're not giving people who's in it. We're starting with an idea. Why is this performance so interesting? And what is that kind of hook that will get people interested? I love the tone of voice in this as well. I love that it starts with "Girl So Confusing." And it's a reasonably short text, but also very, very importantly, always ends with your call to action. When is it on? When can you get tickets? So we're not leading with the core information about this performance. We're leading with the idea, and we're kind of closing it out with that call to action. So you're probably also kind of thinking about, what does this all look like in a plan? So I've kind of told you why I think the plan is so important. So I actually monitored the Barbican Centre in London for a week to see how often they are posting. So this is a big art centre. They have cinema, they have exhibitions, they have theatre, they have music of lots of different genres. They have a lot going on. What I want you to notice about this is how little they are posting. So I think we feel under pressure to post about every single performance, and that we're posting multiple times a day, sometimes every day, that there's a lot of stories going up, there's a lot of stuff being reshared. They have really stripped this out back. And to me, this kind of oozes confidence. They're not pushing every show all the time. They have very structure, and they do some tailoring of content for different channels, but actually not that much. They're repeating a lot of content across their different media channels. And they're using their email lists very, very strongly to give people kind of that grid, that summary of what's on a regular basis. Now, I signed up for all of their email lists, so that's potentially why I was getting three a week. But they're sending out kind of the different kind of tailored newsletters. They generally send about 3 a week, and it wouldn't always be cinema, general, and theatre. There'd always be one general, but they'd also, on another week, they'll have one about classical music, and another week they'll have one about visual art. So they kind of mix it about. The Mondays Are Brutal is their kind of venue focused kind of series. So because the Barbican is it's placed in the city of London around very famous brutalist architecture, that's a really big part of their identity. So they lean into that, and they just do a post just about brutalist architecture every Monday, which I love. And they have very little going on in the stories, which was really interesting to me. So they're doing quite limited resharing of their own reels. They're doing quite limited resharing of other organizations. It's quite stripped back, because I think what we're finding with a lot of stories is where there's a huge amount of kind of reshares sitting in organization stories, people just skipping past them now. So it's this idea of driving value every single time you post. So they're doing less, but they're doing it better. So, sorry, skip ahead. So just kind of briefly content, around content. I know we all feel like this is, a lot of people feel very frazzled around all the activity that's happening. When you're thinking about your content, just always less is more, is first of all, is post less, post better. I'm going to keep saying that. Always be audience and goals focused. Remembering the symbol crash story. We're selling tickets through deepening engagement, through understanding the audience profile and what will really connect with them. Having calls, really clear calls to action. We want to be creative, but we also want to tell people what to do and how to get tickets. So the call to action is super important. In your email, there's lots of different kind of types of newsletters that you can be doing depending on your audience. If you're a festival, you're kind of mid-festival, you're going to be very focused on the program. At a festival, you can tell stories, you can step back, you can kind of help people reflect on what were some of the really brilliant moments from your festival, or tell them a bit more about the art forms and what are some of the kind of the trends that are happening out there. And emails can also be that really nice summary for a really busy venue. So I think just never assume that because you've posted something once, it's done. You need to kind of repeat 3 runs throughout the year and be really consistent with that messaging coming across. Okay. I'm not going to go too much into advertising today because it's very dependent on different organizations, how much or little of this you can do. And I'm very, very keenly aware of that. But I will say that just the need to pay to get additional reach is becoming more and more pronounced. Organic content is really important, but it shouldn't be the only way you promote a show. So, and if anything, this is becoming more and more pronounced as things change. So how can this support your marketing? There's kind of 3 main ways. One is reach. One is simply reliably getting to more people to get your message to them. So you're paying basically to reach people. The second is targeting. And I love this particularly for local art centres, people who are working with a very specific geographic area, is you can be so specific about who you want to talk to. You can look at very particular geographic areas. You can hone it down by interest, by age and gender, but also the advertising systems themselves are getting better and better at their targeting as well. There's a reason these companies' revenues are growing and growing and growing. It's because this advertising is delivering results and people are actually getting to their audiences and they're getting those sales. The last reason I love this is, I mean, have you ever wondered, like going, I wonder whether this message or this message will resonate more with this audience, or I wonder if I should use this image or that image. With advertising, you can do some really fun testing. So you can actually find out and say, and you're able to track which ads are leading to sales. So you can actually find out if one image or another, or if one message or another is actually leading to more sales, which is something that I absolutely love. And then the last piece, and again, I'm not going to get into this in too much because this is a huge area, but tracking and measuring and testing. So the first thing I will say is if you're measuring followers, throw that metric out. It's just become absolutely meaningless. Your real metrics that you want to be focusing on across social media are reach and engagement. Of course, through email, it stays pretty consistent around your kind of click-throughs and your email kind of numbers. Ideally, you're also thinking about this as you're actually executing your work. You're able to think about going, and how is this changing my content pillars and my key messages, and how am I actually achieving my goals? There are some tools where they will do this for you. So Sprout Social, you can like tag all your posts, but you can also just download stuff into Excels and set up your own tracking as well. If you really enjoy doing that, which I know I quite enjoy getting into the detail on that. There's also a huge amount, just even kind of free tracking around urchin tracking module tags that you can be adding, just adding tracking URLs everywhere you can, so that you know when you're putting content out there, is it leading someone back to your website? Are those visits leading to sales? Really kind of using Google Analytics to the maximum. Thinking about your cost per acquisition. So whenever, this is probably the key metric anyone who's doing digital advertising is looking at, is how much money am I spending for each ticket sale? And how does that vary per channel, per audience type? And this gives you a really good indication of value and impact. And it helps you justify as well to other people's in your organizations or board members why we need to spend some of this money. And then finally, we talked a little, I just mentioned there about testing under advertising. You can also do, I would just really urge you to be testing regularly with your content across email, across ads, and understanding more about what's working for your audience and what's really cutting through. Okay, so wrapping up. So digital marketing, I mean, it is changing and it is becoming even more vital to reach our audiences. So I hope I've made that case with the data that I've shown you this morning, why it's so important for us to keep cutting through with this and to look at what we're doing and to make sure we are actually reaching our audiences through these channels. A couple of things that I would ask you to be, if I ask you to take away kind of 4 things from this presentation today. The first one is to sit and look at your digital activity and say, is it actually in line with where audience behavior and time is spent? Am I spending too much time on one channel, not enough on another? And just actually taking that step back and looking at what you're doing. The second piece, and I'm pretty sure this message has come through loud and clear now, is post less often with better content. Really, really focus on adding value every single time. Understanding that your content is going to be reaching people further up the funnel, more around awareness and interest. And that to really kind of secure those sales, that's where kind of you're going to need to invest in a little bit more advertising to help people kind of make that purchase. And build your email list. And this is something I haven't focused on that much in this presentation, but we all need to build our email list big time, because as it gets harder to cut through on search and social media, we own our email list. I mean, these are our most loyal audience members, and we don't have to pay, apart from MailChimp subscriptions, etc., to reach them. So to really build and segment our email lists is so key to that, to driving purchases especially with your repeat advertisers. When you look back at kind of the Barbican, this is one of the big things that they changed, was they really started using their CRM data, their audience data, and they're much more reliant on their email list to drive those sales. Then have a plan. measure impact. Just please, if you're just sitting there, just kind of posting things without plans and just reacting, please just take that time to step back and think about what type of content am I doing? Who are my audiences? How do I reach them? And, think about impact. So think about reach and engagement. So you can like prove to other people and show people how good a job you're doing and what's working and what's not working. And you can learn so much from that. And then finally, let your passion shine through. I mean, the thing one of the reasons I adore working on this with arts organizations is unlike, a B2B, business company that's maybe selling like toilet paper or something, we all have amazing things to promote and we all feel really passionate about what we're working on. And, let that passion shine through. Think of your content as like a conversation. Think about, why is this, if you're sitting down and talking to a friend and saying, oh my God, we've got this amazing show coming up. Well, oh, why is it amazing? Well, let me tell you, this is this, and this. This is why it's so exciting. And really kind of letting that passion come through, because that's what's going to connect with your audience. And that's it. So I am going to I'll stop sharing there and we'll have a chance for some questions.
Catherine, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Nobody has popped questions into the chat yet. Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question? Or
there is one question that was just at the very beginning from, can you remind us where the data is from and where we can find that? That's from the first few slides there.
I'm going to write that into the chat. It's data reportal. And I'm going to write that into the chat so you all have it.
Perfect.
Someone's asked here, are there any free platforms for tracking social posts? I'm a little bit out of date on my knowledge in this. I know Hootsuite certainly used to do a certain level of free. The best advice here is to look at the up and coming reporting platforms. So what happens is if you're a new company, you're trying to build your user base and you're going to offer more of your offering for free. So once you're established, you've already got good user base, and then they'll start upping the subscription fees and start making less and less free. So I don't have a good list right now. I definitely go and do a bit of digging, but the best advice is just to move whenever suits you, whenever you can, and try and go to, because the free platforms will be the new platforms because they're trying to build up their users. Sorry, I'm just having a look at the piece, see if anything else. No. Let's see, free platforms tracking social posts. Thoughts on how to grow email subscribers. It is about integrating it into all of your communications. I think we often kind of sit back and just go, oh, we're kind of there, but it's every time you're sending a thank you email, especially to new audience members, it's having it really prominent on your website, just and experimenting with different places on your website to make it more engaging. It's, having it kind of available in your venue through QR codes is a really, really nice way to get people signed up to your mailing list. And incentives as well can be another way, is that there's some kind of incentive to be on the, like you're showing why it's helpful. I think, particularly for people who maybe are a new audience and there's like, you want to know what else is coming up, make sure you're on our mailing list. That would be one of the key things. But you can also run ads as well to grow subscribers as well. That certainly does work. Do I find Facebook/Meta metrics or Google Analytics more reliable, or a mix of the two? I would say probably a mix of the two, and because it very much depends on what you're tracking, because they'll have different types of tracking pixels, so you will get different information from them. So it can be hard to give very specific answers on some of them because it can very much depend on what data you're looking at. Tips, templates for marketing plans. Off the top of my head, I mean, generally you can kind of Google for some fairly simple ones, but it's often you're kind of starting. I generally start with audience identification. And then below that, go to messaging, and then I actually think about goals after that, because I'm thinking about
who are my audiences and what matters to them, and then that actually drives my outcomes as the next piece. But even some of the pieces I put in the slides there can be a good kind of starting point. Okay, benefits of moving to less popular newer platforms such as Blue Sky or Mastodon. They're kind of like, you can, but it's very hard for new platforms to break through. And I think what we've seen with these two is they're not really breaking through. They're kind of like they're plateaued out. The ones that are certainly growing, I'm hearing like a lot about Threads, just steady growth. So Meta Threads is steady growth. And, you know, I know maybe you're trying to get away from that company and try and go to slightly more ethical places. So, but I don't know if that's what's driving it, but Threads is certainly growing. I think LinkedIn is just one not to forget about. Pinterest is, it can be a really nice place as well. You know, it definitely has a lot of people who kind of overlap with our audiences. So maybe not even the newer ones, but thinking about the ones that exist already, and are you kind of using them? But don't feel like you have to be everywhere as well. You really don't. Like, you know, focus. It's totally fine to focus on, you know, just 2 or 3 kind of really priority places. Let's see, algorithms and priorities. With algorithms and priorities changing all the time, are there any resources or people you recommend for keeping up to date? I love the Digital Culture Network in the UK. So they are funded by the Arts Council England, and I find them very, very helpful for arts specific places. HubSpot do a very good newsletter. And there's one called, I think it's called the Digital Marketing Podcast as well. And they're like an ad agency in the UK, and I find them very helpful. Best tools to help with marketing-led social media copy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is there, as in, is it design or, oh, I mean, I guess it's copy. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't have any good tools in that. Certainly AI is coming more into the advertising copy space with huge health warnings. AI can be very, very helpful if you have a very strong content strategy behind it. And if you're using paid AI subscriptions. So what I'm noticing at the moment is a lot of people saying, oh, AI didn't work, or I kind of popped into ChatGPT and I tried this, that, the other, and the results I got were pretty rubbish. The paid AI pieces are a lot better. So that's where the people are using AI really effectively. They're paying for it, is one. And 2, AI around advertising strategy is rubbish in, rubbish out. If you're kind of expecting it to come up with the ideas and to come up kind of from scratch, it's not going to do that. If you kind of give it really good information around who you are, what matters to you, who your audience are, what your kind of, and what your brand is, then it's way more likely to kind of actually spit out good copy on the other side. So people are using AI more and more for marketing copy, but they're paying for it, and it's sitting on top of a very strong strategy. Okay, and then the next question is, how can LinkedIn be useful to arts organizations? Isn't it mostly for HR and hiring? That's a great question. So who's on LinkedIn? People who work, basically. And who's buying our tickets? People who work. So our audiences are on LinkedIn, and they're not all looking for HR, and they're not looking for kind of HR and industry updates. What I find is people are generally only going on to talk to their corporate sponsors. You know, and like people almost, and it's almost like, I always feel like when someone goes to post on LinkedIn, they like a sit up straight, you know, and they kind of button their collar, and they get like way more, they go into professional mode. And I think you can be a lot more relaxed on LinkedIn than you think you can. Sure, change your copy a little bit, you know, just to adjust it a little bit from Instagram, but you can be putting the same images up there. You can absolutely be talking about pieces that are coming up, your organization. It's a really, really nice place around kind of, you know, kind of driving awareness around who you are as an organization, and kind of what matters to you. So have a look at what other people are doing. Things like polls are doing really well on LinkedIn. It turns out people love answering polls on LinkedIn, so they're kind of having a bit of a moment. So there's lots of, I would say, just have a look around and just don't be afraid of posting more, because there's a great audience on that. Sorry, did I miss a question about Reddit, which I didn't see? Oh yeah, did you say earlier to open a Reddit account even for a sole operator / writer performer? You absolutely can be on Reddit. There's no particular reason not to, as organizations. The general advice around Reddit is to be deeply, deeply authentic. Reddit users are very, very quick to cotton on if somebody's trying to kind of post any level of corporate content. So to be there as a user, you need to be very authentic and very real. But the other reason for being conscious of Reddit is around advertising. So it's the idea that there is a growing, very engaged audience on Reddit. So if you're trying to reach audiences, Reddit advertising can be a nice thing. Now, it comes with some health warnings. It's it's new, it's a little bit glitchy, but as you're thinking about where you spend your money, where your audiences are, just keep an eye out for Reddit. And I would just say, it's one to watch at the moment.
Catherine, that's just been such great information. Oh, one person just popped in, how to be careful around trolling. Sorry.
I mean, it depends. I mean, you can be, if you're thinking about kind of just general comment management, there's various kind of keyword blockers and stuff like that you can set up to be conscious around that. I'm not sure if that's kind of specifically around Reddit. I think Reddit's actually a bit of a kind of safer space for trolling. But yeah, I mean, trolling is just general kind of comment management. Don't engage. You use kind of like comment, like you can use kind of specific word blockers to try and kind of just block some kind of comments at the time. But yeah, probably more of an issue on X. I'm kind of not seeing it as much anymore, kind of certainly kind of with our types of audiences on kind of Facebook, Instagram.
Super. Listen, everything else now is just going to be thank yous, I think. So thank you so much for that. And we'll follow up with everybody with a copy of the recording if they want to watch it again. And maybe we could have a PDF of the slides to send people as well. And we might include a little bit of feedback. So if there's other things that you'd love to cover in this general area, you could let us know, because we're very keen to provide more of these kind of events. So thanks so much for giving us your time this morning, and look forward to seeing you again soon.